A junkyard isn't a graveyard for things. It's a museum of good ideas that went bad and bad ideas that went exactly as planned. It's the final, rusty resting place for forgotten dreams, bizarre ambitions, and things that were just too weird to exist anywhere else. We're not just looking at scrap metal today. We're digging through the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes unsettling a chapter of 49 objects that have a much better story to tell in death than they ever did in life. 1. Stumbling upon an old-fashioned gas pump is like shaking hands with a ghost from a bygone economic era. Forget a rusty heap. This thing was immaculate, with curved glass and chrome trim, so pristine it looked poised to serve a phantom Cadillac that vanished decades ago. A true piece of Americana, left to contemplate its own obsolescence. You have to wonder what price was last spun on its mechanical dials. 30 cents a gallon? This relic isn't just junk. It's a monument to a time when filling your tank didn't require a second mortgage. 2. Alright, let's dial the creepy factor up to 11. Imagine an entire abandoned school bus. Now, imagine it's not empty. The inside is a silent, static traffic jam of old mannequins, all staring blankly forward as if their plastic brains simultaneously short-circuited after hearing a deeply unsettling secret. The official story claims it was a prop for a haunted house. My theory? A failed witness protection program for some very, very stiff individuals. Whatever its origin, it's a four-wheeled vessel of pure nightmare fuel just waiting for its next cursed route. 3. Just when you think a junkyard is only about rust and decay, you're blinded by the ghost of nightlife past. A giant neon sign from an old strip club, flickering pathetically in the daylight, cast its faded pink glow over mountains of actual garbage. You can almost smell the faint echo of cheap perfume and bad decisions clinging to it. It's an analog invitation from an era before temptation was a click away. A relic that once promised a good time, now offering its services to a pile of rusty hubcaps. 4. This next find is a bit more poetic, in a very tetanus shot required sort of way. It was an entire congregation of vintage mailboxes, some dating back to the early 1900s. Instead of simple tin boxes, these were ornate, hand-painted portals that once held handwritten love letters, draft notices, and scathing neighborhood gossip. It was a forgotten social network forged from metal, its members all huddled in a dusty corner, probably complaining to each other about the lack of decent mail. A sad final post for the original social media. 5. Art is subjective, but finding a masterpiece in a junkyard is just beautifully bizarre. Spread across a huge, warped piece of old barnwood was no mere graffiti, but a stunning, hand-painted pastoral scene with grazing cows and a serene sunset. A regular Bob Ross special. Imagine some farmer pouring his soul onto this plank a century ago, only for it to end up as the most sophisticated piece of trash in a 5-mile radius. It's a profound statement on the temporary nature of things, a priceless piece of art just waiting to be rescued or crushed. 6. Leave it to Texas to produce a junkyard find this specific. A full-sized mechanical bull, looking like a retired rodeo star put out to pasture. Covered in rust and, one assumes, regret, it had clearly bucked its last drunken tourist. But here's the kicker. The mechanism was reportedly still functional. For one glorious, ill-advised moment, you could have been the undisputed king of the junkyard rodeo. It's a perfect symbol of American bravado. Built for a wild ride, used for a few glorious seconds, and then left to rust among the other bad ideas. 7. Behold, the ghost of Christmas past, and he is very, very deflated. Forget your garden variety lawn decoration. This was a titan of holiday cheer, a multi-story inflatable Santa that once lorded over a shopping mall. Now he lay in a tangled, undignified heap, a tragic victim of post-holiday indifference. What unspeakable crime did he commit to deserve this fate? Get caught drinking the reindeer's eggnog? Whatever the reason, his jolly reign ended here, amidst broken appliances and shattered dreams. It's a real ho-ho. Oh no, moment. 8. Just when you think you've seen the peak of junkyard absurdity, we present glorious failure on a monumental scale, a life-sized replica of the Statue of Liberty. Yes, an entire Lady Liberty, abandoned after some ambitious public art project predictably ran out of money. There she stood, a colossal beacon of freedom, except she was welcoming you to a landscape of scrap metal and despair. Her copper was turning that iconic green, not from sea air, but from the sheer, crushing irony of her situation. It's the most profound commentary on the American dream you could possibly find in a landfill. Give me your tired, your poor, your rusty transmissions. 9. Someone found a vintage jukebox, and against all odds, it still worked. They plugged it in, and classic rock and roll suddenly filled the junkyard. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a spontaneous, dusty party. For a few minutes, the place probably felt less like a scrap heap and more like a forgotten roadside diner where the only customers are rust and ghosts. You have to wonder what the final song was before it was unplugged for good. 10. In the remains of a closed amusement park, a giant stuffed bear was left behind. Once a coveted prize, a symbol of a perfect day out, it now sat slumped over, its fur faded and worn by the elements. It's a pretty bleak image. Why was it abandoned? Probably too big to move and too sad to look at. It's a fluffy, depressing monument to the fact that all fun must eventually come to an end, usually in a pile of weeds. 11. Here's a throwback. A vintage high-wheel bicycle, the kind with the ridiculously enormous front wheel. Just seeing one standing there, rusting but upright, is a bizarre sight. It's a stark reminder of a time when commuting involved risking serious injury and looking completely absurd while doing it. That thing wasn't just a bicycle. It was a balancing act with pedals, and probably responsible for more faceplants than any other invention in history. 12. Someone in a landlocked state stumbled upon a giant, deflated inflatable octopus. Folded and wrinkled, it lay there, looking like a massive, sad balloon. You could still make out its huge tentacles and cartoonish eyes, making the find even stranger. It's the kind of thing that makes you question your sanity. How did it get here? Did a parade have a very, very bad day? Or is this just evidence that sea monsters have terrible navigation skills? 13. Finding an old military tank in a junkyard shouldn't be normal, but in some parts of Texas it almost is. This metal beast was partially buried under scrap, a forgotten instrument of war now serving as a shelf for old tires. It's less a piece of history and more a multi-ton statement about what happens after the parade is over. It was probably waiting for some guy with a big enough backyard and a serious lack of judgment to come rescue it. 14. A massive stack of old vinyl records is a treasure trove for music nerds. These weren't just common albums. Many were from obscure bands with incredible cover art. Piled high and covered in dust, it was a library of cool just waiting to be rediscovered. To most people, it's a pile of dirty plastic. To the right person, it's a winning lottery ticket for the ears. You just have to be willing to risk spider bites to claim your prize. 15. An antique wagon wheel is a direct link to America's pioneer past. This thing was built to cross the wild frontier, enduring hardships we can't even imagine. And its epic journey ended here, in a pile of junk. There's a dark sort of humor in that. It survived mountains, rivers, and probably dysentery, but it couldn't survive being replaced by a rubber tire. That's progress for you. 16. A neat pile of vintage license plates from every single state is a strange find. This wasn't a random collection. It was carefully stacked. This immediately shifts the mystery. It's not about the plates themselves, but about the person who collected them. Was this a life's passion, abandoned? Or did a very organized road tripper meet a very sudden end? Either way, it's a fascinating and slightly unsettling discovery. 17. Seeing an old tractor, one of the first models ever made, left to rust is just sad. This machine was a beast, a vital tool that helped feed the nation, and its retirement plan was to be dumped in a junkyard. It's a solid piece of American history, and it was treated like a broken lawnmower. It's hard not to look at it and think it deserved a little more respect, or at least a clean spot in a barn. 18. In a world of cheap, modern fixtures, a vintage porcelain bathtub with intricate details stands out. This wasn't just for getting clean, it was a piece of art. It was probably ripped out during a renovation in favor of some boring, sterile replacement. Now it sits in the mud, a forgotten relic from a time when people actually cared what their bathroom looked like. It's waiting for someone to rescue it and restore its former glory. 19. Finding an old, handcrafted wooden surfboard from the 1960s in a junkyard is just wrong. This board wasn't a cheap piece of foam. It was a relic from the golden age of California beach culture. You can tell it rode countless waves. Now it's just sitting there, hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean, a forgotten icon surrounded by things that are actually supposed to be junk. 20. Right in the middle of a junkyard, a giant metal sculpture of a rooster towered over everything. It was clearly made from scrap metal, looking like a bizarre community art project that was never displayed. Or maybe it was, and the community hated it. Why a rooster? No idea. It's a perfect example of folk art at its most random, a metal king ruling over an empire of trash. 21. Someone's 80s dream died a slow death here. A genuine DeLorean, abandoned and rusting. Not the time machine, but still an icon. Its stainless steel body was meant to be futuristic, but it couldn't escape the very mundane fate of decay. You have to wonder why someone would let it go. Most likely, they got the repair bill and realized it would be cheaper to actually build a time machine and go back to before they bought it. 22. As if junkyards needed to be creepier, someone found a set of broken fortune teller machines. Lifeless and dusty, they sat in a corner. But here's the kicker. Their sound boxes were still partially working. As people passed, a distorted voice would occasionally croak out a vague, ominous warning. It's one thing to find junk, it's another thing when the junk starts talking back. 23. It's one thing to see a small toy train, but this was a giant wooden one, big enough for kids to climb on. It was obviously the centerpiece of an old playground. Now its paint is faded and its wheels are stuck. It's a sad sight, a vessel of past joy now permanently derailed in a place where nothing is fun. It's a powerful symbol of forgotten childhoods, left to rot. 24. Digging through grime and expecting to find an old car part, but instead hitting a massive stone sculpture. This thing looked ancient, like it was stolen from a museum and then hastily buried. The logistics of how something so large and seemingly valuable ends up in a junkyard are just baffling. It's a find that raises far more questions than answers, starting with, whose garage was this cluttering up? 25. A set of old, unmarked police badges feels like a clue from a detective movie. They were real, heavy, and worn, suggesting they belonged to a long-gone department. Their anonymity is what makes them so eerie. Were they part of a uniform collection, or were they discarded for a more sinister reason? It's the kind of find that makes you want to start investigating, but also makes you feel like you probably shouldn't. 26. Sometimes the simplest things are the most charming. A vintage toaster from the 1950s with shiny chrome and retro buttons is a perfect example. It was built to last, a small stylish tank for your kitchen counter. It was probably tossed because it only has one job and can't connect to Wi-Fi. It's a relic from an era when things were designed to keep working, much to the annoyance of people who want you to buy a new one every year. 27. An old-school barber chair is more than just a seat. It's a piece of history. With its worn leather and heavy chrome, it was a throne where generations of people got their hair cut and shared town gossip. It has probably heard more secrets than a bartender. Seeing it discarded feels like watching a local landmark get demolished. That chair holds 1,000 stories, and now it's just waiting for the crusher. 28. Finding a vintage vending machine from the 1950s is cool. Finding one still stocked with snacks from that era is both amazing and slightly horrifying. It's a time capsule of petrified candy bars and sodas that have likely become explosive. You can look at the menu of a bygone era, but you probably shouldn't try anything. It's the ultimate tease. A machine full of snacks that will almost certainly kill you. 29. There are some things that just break your brain, like finding an abandoned boat half submerged in a field of weeds. Not a lake, not a river, a field. This wasn't a little rowboat. It was a legitimate seafaring vessel, now permanently dry docked in a sea of dirt and grass. The questions are immediate and absurd. Did the captain take a spectacularly wrong turn? Was there a biblical-level flood that only this guy knew about and he just missed the boat, so to speak? It sits there like a monument to a truly epic navigational failure, its hull slowly becoming one with the earth. 30. Nothing hits the nostalgia button quite like an old ice cream truck. especially one with its original, vibrant paint job still clinging to life. This rusty relic looked like it had just finished its route yesterday, only to be abandoned forever. You can almost hear the faint, ghostly echo of its cheerful jingle, a sound that once brought kids running with joy, now just adding a layer of creepiness to the silent junkyard. It's a sad, sweet reminder of a simpler time, when happiness was a melting popsicle on a hot day, delivered by a truck that now serves only rust and spiders. 31. Deep within a junkyard, someone came across a giant tree stump that was watching them. This wasn't just pareidolia. It had a face meticulously carved into it, complete with detailed eyes, a nose, and a solemn mouth. The carving was so well done, it gave the stump a distinct, eerie personality. It felt ancient, like some forgotten forest god who was forced to witness the slow decay of civilization from its humble throne of rot. You have to wonder who carved it. A bored lumberjack with a gift for sculpture, or someone who just wanted to make sure the junkyard was properly supervised. 32. Here's a perfect symbol for wealth flushed down the drain: a gold-plated toilet. Found amidst the ruins of a collapsed mansion, this opulent throne was a leftover from an era of ridiculous excess. The house was gone, but this bizarre relic remained. It's a testament to a time when someone had so much money, they wanted every single part of their life to be gilded. How did it end up here? Maybe it was just too gaudy to salvage, or perhaps it stands as a final, gleaming insult from a rich person who lost everything but their ridiculously fancy toilet. 33. You expect to find cars, but finding a vintage airplane is a whole different level of abandonment. This rare 1950s model, once a proud vessel of the skies, was now grounded permanently. Its valuable parts were stripped away long ago, leaving behind a skeletal frame that told a story of countless adventures and destinations. Its presence in a junkyard is a profound mystery. Restoring such a craft would cost a fortune, so maybe it was just easier to let it die here. It's a tragic sight, a machine built for freedom, now trapped in a prison of scrap metal. 34. Some hobbies are productive. Others result in a giant, unwieldy ball of rubber bands being abandoned in a junkyard. This wasn't a neat, office desk-sized ball. It was a massive, chaotic sphere of stretched, tangled rubber. It looks like someone was halfway through a very ambitious, and ultimately pointless, world record attempt before they got bored and just gave up. It sits there like a bizarre monument to procrastination and wasted time. A colorful, slowly rotting tumor of rubber that begs the question, who has this many rubber bands and this few life goals? 35. As if a junkyard isn't surreal enough, imagine stumbling upon a giant concrete hand sticking out of the ground. This sculpture was huge, large enough to palm a person's head like a basketball. Its fingers were curled, as if it was reaching for something just out of its grasp before being frozen in time. Was it part of a much larger, now-buried statue of a colossus? Or just a bizarre, standalone piece of art? Either way, its presence is deeply unsettling, a silent, gray gesture from a forgotten giant, now surrounded by our discarded trash. 36. This next find is deeply poetic and a little bit sad. A full collection of antique mirrors, all with ornate frames, stacked in a dark corner. Some were shattered, some were cracked, and some were just faded, reflecting a dim, distorted version of their grimy surroundings. These mirrors once reflected lives, families, secrets, and vanities. Now they are a mosaic of bad luck and forgotten faces. It's as if they collectively decided to stop reflecting time itself, and instead just show the grim reality of where all beautiful things eventually end up. 37. Amidst the heaps of scrap, someone unearthed a nearly intact fire truck. While it had seen better days, the core of the vehicle was still there, a big red symbol of heroism left to rust. It's ironic, isn't it? A machine designed to save things from destruction, now just waiting to be destroyed itself. It was probably buried for years, and uncovering it felt like a trip back in time to an era of different sirens and simpler equipment. You can't help but feel an urge to climb in and see if the horn still works. 38. Gargoyles are supposed to be perched high on old cathedrals, warding off evil spirits. They are not supposed to be lying face down in the dirt of a junkyard. This massive stone gargoyle was weathered and cracked, but it still had an imposing, almost menacing presence. Even on the ground, it felt like it was watching every move you made. It's a wonder some goth kid hadn't tried to steal it for their front lawn. It's a fallen guardian, its duty long over, now forced to watch over a kingdom of rust instead of a congregation. 39. Here lies the apex predator of the water park, now beached and defeated. A giant inflatable shark, once the terrifying centerpiece of a popular ride, was found deflated and discarded. After the park closed its doors for good, this icon of summer fun was rolled up and tossed aside like a common pool toy. It's a sad end for such a magnificent plastic beast. The king of the lazy river, a creature that swallowed thousands of screaming children, now reduced to a wrinkled pile of vinyl in a place with absolutely no water. 40. Every so often you find something that isn't just junk. It's a piece of outsider art. Case in point, a car with a full piano inexplicably attached to its hood. This wasn't a shoddy job. The piano was integrated into the vehicle's frame, a bizarre and wonderful marriage of transportation and music. Why was it built? Was it for impromptu roadside concerts? A failed parade float? No one knows why it was abandoned, but its sheer, unapologetic weirdness makes it one of the most memorable finds possible. It's a rolling symphony of questionable decisions. 41. At the very edge of a junkyard, sitting on a stretch of rusted, forgotten tracks, was an old train caboose. This was the classic final car, the rolling office and home for the crew that once crossed the entire country. Now, it's a graffiti-covered shell, a hollow piece of American history literally at the end of the line. Seeing it there is surreal. It's not just a piece of scrap metal. It's a symbol of a bygone era of travel and industry, left to slowly dissolve back into the earth it once traversed. 42. This is the kind of find that makes treasure hunters weep. A rare, limited edition pinball machine from the late 1970s. Only about 200 of these were ever made. And it was just sitting there, tucked away in a corner of a junkyard. The flashy lights and classic sounds were reportedly still intact. Did the owner have any idea they were throwing away something potentially worth thousands of dollars? Or was it just a casualty of a bitter divorce? Either way, it's a high-scoring tragedy. 43. It's like someone threw out their entire 1950s kitchen in one go. A giant collection of antique appliances, refrigerators with those huge curved doors, heavy enamel stoves, and even old-school coffee grinders. These things were built like tanks, designed with a style and durability that make modern appliances look like cheap toys. Seeing them all together in a junkyard wasn't just looking at junk. It was like walking through a time-warped museum exhibit dedicated to the American kitchen of yesteryear. They just don't make them like that anymore. 44. You expect to see a child's rocking horse, but this thing was different. It was an enormous wooden rocking horse, large enough for a full-grown adult to ride. Handcrafted from heavy oak, it was still shockingly sturdy despite the peeling paint and years of neglect. The sheer scale of it makes it unsettling. Who builds an adult-sized rocking horse, and for what purpose? It sits there in the junkyard, a monument to a very specific and probably very strange childhood, or adulthood. 45. Finding a teddy bear in a junkyard is sad. Finding one that's the size of a human being is downright heartbreaking and a little creepy. This giant bear was well worn, with a stitched-up patch on its belly, suggesting it was once deeply loved. So why was it abandoned? Who leaves behind a companion this massive? It looked like a character that escaped from a child's dream, only to find itself in a real-world nightmare, a soft, silent giant surrounded by sharp, rusty metal. 46. This has to be the most tempting and dangerous find imaginable. A vintage vending machine, still completely full of expired candy. We're talking petrified chocolate bars from the 80s and fossilized gumballs from who knows when. For anyone who loves nostalgia, it's a potential goldmine. It's a sweet trip down memory lane where every item is perfectly preserved in its original wrapper. Of course, eating any of it would be a terrible, terrible idea. It's the ultimate forbidden snack machine. 47. You could almost smell the buttered popcorn just by looking at it. A vintage popcorn machine, the classic red kind you'd find in a 1950s movie theater lobby. Complete with a hand crank and glass case, it sat in a dusty corner, a forgotten vessel of cinematic magic. It was abandoned, but it still held the promise of a simple, happy experience. It was like finding the ghost of Saturday matinees, just waiting for someone to plug it in and start one last show among the ruins. 48. This wasn't just a rocking chair, it was a piece of forgotten technology. From a 1920s estate, this antique mechanical rocking chair was built to rock on its own. With intricate carvings and a complex internal mechanism, it was a luxury item from a time of quiet elegance. Discarded when the estate was sold, it now sits motionless, its gentle, automated rock long gone. Was it too old, or perhaps too haunted, to keep? It's a beautiful, intricate piece of furniture whose final purpose is to slowly fall apart. 49. In a place defined by large, rusty objects, one of the most poignant finds was a small tin box. Inside was a collection of vintage typewriter ribbons from the early 1900s. Still sealed, these ribbons were pristine, holding ink that was never used. They were forgotten potential. Each one could have written a novel, a love letter, or a declaration of war. Instead, they sat there, silent and full of unwritten words. It's a quiet, powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest stories are the ones that were never told. So there you have it, 49 monuments to failure, forgotten joy, and pure, unapologetic weirdness. Now let's be honest with each other for a second. If you were alone in that junkyard, with no one watching and a truck waiting, which one of these finds would you have loaded up and taken home? Don't be shy. The comment section is a judgment-free zone. Mostly. If you appreciate a good story buried in rust, give this video a like. And subscribe so you don't miss our next dive into the beautifully strange.